Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Code and Capital, Benzinga's new show on how technology is impacting banking and financial services. I'm really excited today to welcome Joe Robinson, CEO and founder of Hummingbird, a leading anti-money laundering company based in San Francisco. The Hummingbird uses AI to speed up the AML processes at banks, fintech companies, and crypto firms, and works with companies like Stripe and Coinbase. I've known Joe for a while, and he's an expert in the AML space, so I'm really excited to have him. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Pleased to be here. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah. So for listeners who aren't super familiar with Hummingbird, can you tell us a little bit about what the company does and what problem you're solving in banking operations?
Absolutely. We are an investigation platform for a variety of concerns behind the scenes in the risk and compliance world. So I like to draw the analogy, we're almost like a Salesforce for risk and compliance teams in the financial industry. But instead of sales prospects or customers or things like that, you have the subjects of your investigation work in the platform. This is a regulated practice area. It's actually a requirement for all licensed financial institutions globally, banks, credit unions, payments companies, crypto, casinos, mortgage lenders, securities firms. They all have these obligations, and it's a really interesting practice area. In a lot of ways, it's the way the financial industry keeps the system safe and collaborates with law enforcement against large-scale organized crime, money flows, human trafficking rings, things like that. So really cool practice area. We're about an 8-year-old company. We power the program for a lot of great institutions out there.
Awesome. Yeah, so you've been in the finance space for a while. I know that your background includes working at Square and Circle. So what did you learn at those companies that led you to start an AML company? And what's the opportunity that you guys are trying to tackle that others aren't really focused on?
Yeah, I fell into the finance world through Square in 2011. I was coming at it from the software side, so I had been a product manager before that in the online video space. And I had been actually trying to start a startup building a web-based point of sale system that just realized was going to be a very challenging model to get off the ground, but made for the perfect interview with Square. So ended up joining that company. I was the product lead for Square Dashboard, so the interface for Square's merchants. And then later was part of the team that kicked off Square's first e-commerce products, which at that time was known as Square Market. If you've ordered food from a Square merchant today or anything like that, you've seen some of that product in action. I didn't actually work in this practice area for Square. I consulted with the compliance team and actually got to know a little bit about what the requirements were and the things they were thinking about through that experience. But it wasn't until later in my career that I really came kind of fully into the anti-fraud and anti-money laundering world. I joined Circle, which at the time was more akin to like a Coinbase. It was a crypto exchange where you could buy and sell cryptocurrencies. Circle, of course, today is famous for USDC coin, one of the stable coin providers, but that was the first iteration with Circle as crypto was getting off the ground, was more of the traditional exchange activity. And like any exchange in that market, Circle and others at the time dealt with a whole variety of new crime typologies. This was kind of a parallel time frame to when dark web marketplaces like Silk Road were taking off. Nobody was quite sure what to make of digital currencies or how they should be regulated. And it wasn't exactly clear what their relationship to the traditional currency or the fiat currency world should be. Should you be able to, buy cryptocurrency with a debit card or a credit card or things like that? Those are all like big questions we had at the time. And there's a lot of fraud. Candidly, like I think every exchange that went through that era, this was like 2014, 2015, 2016, really experienced high volumes of fraud and had to figure all of this out from scratch. There was really no precedent for it. My role at Circle was initially VP of product, but as we got the products launched and market, the greater need at the time at the company was a head of risk and data science. I stepped into that role, built up the transaction monitoring program and anti-fraud programs. And again, kind of got a little bit exposed to the compliance side, the AML obligations, but didn't touch it that closely there. And I left Circle, toured Europe for about a year and a half, did some work for IDEO, and then a guy that I had worked with at Circle, Matt Van Buskirk, we caught up at South by Southwest, and he had this idea for a platform around suspicious activity reporting. Actually, was the initial idea. And we sort of broadened that to the investigation platform that Hummingbird is today over time.
So it's really interesting. You mentioned that like you were on the risk and compliance side, on the risk side and the data science side at Circle,
Yeah.
but you weren't touching AML. So I think just to double click on that, a lot of people just assume that risk, compliance, and all that is just in one, division at the company, right? But it's actually a much more fragmented, nuanced product line, right? And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about where AML sits in that process. So maybe we can talk about it from a user journey perspective. Because there's also KYC, and I feel like there's all these different like points in the journey that are a lot more intricate than we expect from behind the scenes.
Let's talk about crime, Ian. I actually really like when we're onboarding new employees or I'm talking to folks outside the industry about it. I kind of like to start at a really high level. I think because most folks have just never had the opportunity to have a conversation about the nature of crime.
Right.
And so I normally start in and say first, like, there's generally two types of crime in the world. Crimes of passion, so people get angry and they commit acts and do things because they're upset, and crimes of profit, so crimes that are committed essentially to make money, right? The crimes that are committed to make money in one form or another tend to be a much larger thing, right? Like crimes of passion tend to happen in the moment. Crimes of profit are institutionalized and massive. And within the crimes of profit, you have a lot of different stuff. Like, Ian, I could steal your credit card, go out and buy some shoes or a new guitar or something like that. That's first party fraud. Luckily, in 2025, this day and age, your card company's really good at catching that. You, as the card holder, are probably not going to pay a dime. The merchant may actually lose out in that fraud, but a lot of times the card companies have gotten so good at blocking first party fraud that it just doesn't happen in the first place unless something more intricate's happening. But if you think about other forms of crime, like money laundering, what is money laundering? Money laundering is the act of trying to hide the origin of money that you've received for a crime. And a lot of times the crimes that lead to money laundering are much worse in nature. They're large scale human trafficking rings, drug cartels, illegal weapons sales, political corruption and bribery, all sorts of types of human exploitation that are happening largely for the profit of what sometimes are very large organizations. So when you're considering those large forms of exploitation and money laundering, a lot of this profession that I serve with Hummingbird is about trying to prevent that. It's kind of a three-party system. The financial institutions do the investigation work. They communicate suspicious activity to law enforcement. Law enforcement goes and prosecutes the crimes and combines the financial activity with other evidence that they have for prosecution. So that's kind of the way the systems work. Going back to your original question about like fraud versus money laundering, some of the major differences are the scale. First party fraud tends to be on a smaller scale. Money laundering can be, it's estimated to literally be trillions of dollars a year. And the sophistication of the criminals is just generally much higher. They know what they're doing. A lot of times lawyers, accountants, things like that are part of the apparatus of money laundering rings. So much larger scale of financial crime.
That's a super, super great breakdown. Thanks so much. Let's move on to the AI side of things. I know that, you started out with SAR filing, which is obviously a really complicated and like, I think very manual process at a bank. So
Yeah.
you recently launched an AI automation tool. How does this new automation feature work, and what kind of the manual repetitive task does it actually help eliminate or speed up?
So interestingly, the way the financial industry and law enforcement communicate about suspicious activity is through written reports about the activity. And, that would be like if you and I, Ian, were money launderers and we're, we have a system of businesses set up and we're laundering money through them. The onus is on the investigator at the bank or financial institution to understand what's happening and then turn that into a written report. A lot of times it, looks and feels kind of like a lengthy book report or something like that. And as you can imagine, like writing one of those up takes hours. It's a very tedious process. And most financial institutions are doing lots and lots of these reports. So there's a whole function in the back office of your normal bank or whatever that is just writing these reports and communicating this information to law enforcement. So, what I think about AI and the emergence of large language models over the last couple of years, what are the superpowers they have? Number one is summarization. They're great at looking across fragmented data and then providing the human with a summary of what key points are in that information. The other is like when they kind of know the structure of a written document that you want and you give it a few bullet points and things like that, they're really good at writing that up quickly, and that can save hours. So we use AI in Hummingbird for both, and we specifically tune prompt engineering and safety features around anti-financial crime use cases and regulatory obligations. So there's some special characteristics there for AI.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd love to hear, how you actually are ensuring that, while you're automating these processes, that it doesn't compromise the control, transparency, how you, bake in the auditability for regulators that are obviously looking pretty closely at these use cases.
I think too, it's helpful to start by understanding why is that segment sensitive? Why are regulators looking at things for model validation, meaning like predictability of the outcome, explainability of the outcome, things like that. The U.S. financial industry and globally actually has a long history of violating the rights of consumers. So there's, of course, financial crime committed by a drug cartel or things like that. The banking industry itself has historically committed crimes against us as consumers and as of citizens of the U.S. There's some really dark history around systemic discrimination against minorities for things like mortgage lending, small business loans, things like that. And so a system of regulation has evolved around ensuring that that doesn't happen and that financial institutions aren't doing those things. But that all kind of translates into like anytime you introduce automation or AI, we of course want to make sure the AI doesn't then introduce violations of our rights as consumers or systemic discrimination or things like that. So there are a lot of checks and balances in the regulations themselves to ensure that that's the case. As it comes to AI, really good and discrete example of AI in this practice area is like when you're writing up financial crime for law enforcement, you could imagine like you don't want the AI to invent something that didn't happen and put that in the report.
Yeah.
And that's actually surprisingly difficult. Your average large language model is literally designed to try and answer you no matter what. Like if you ask it a question, its job is to try and come up with an answer to that, whether or not it has information for you. And so, that's one of the areas where we spend a lot of our time is like, can we cite the sources and get the AI to come back with a non-response or to tell you there is nothing, no data in your case, when it doesn't have a good answer to your question.
Yeah, it's so funny to think about hallucinations in the context of financial services. Like the potential for that is very open-ended. And I think, as frequent users of like professional AI services, even I see like ChatGPT or Claude just hallucinate when I'm asking for like sources on a report. They'll just make up a study that doesn't exist. So I
Yeah.
think figuring out like that on the financial services side seems like a way more complex problem.
I I kind of feel like we should disclaim as well, like this is being recorded in mid-May
Yes.
2025. Like literally over the last several weeks, we've had some of the new research models come out, O3 from OpenAI, others, and like, yeah, the ability of these things to cite their sources and the reasoning models, which are, using multiple prompt engineering and things like that to arrive at the best answer or most accurate answer. I feel like that's evolving like almost daily. So like by the time this podcast is out, this may be less of an issue, but right now it's a very serious issue
Yeah,
and
the pace.
consideration.
It's
So
actually a great segue. The pace of innovation in AI is really fast. I think faster than like what most people expect from even software. And obviously, like with financial services, you can't really move fast and break things just given how difficult, how important it is to have money safe and secure for people, but also on the regulatory side. So you guys
yeah.
have something called Hummingbird Labs and are thinking about compliance grade AI. I'd love to hear about what that entails in practice and how do you foster innovation and experimentation at Hummingbird without sacrificing any of the quality and security and regulatory, regulatory. What's the word? Let me rephrase that question.
Yeah, the regulatory compliance component.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's, in many ways, we see that as our unique value add to the industry. We are not, again, 2025 May. We are not today a large language model author. We're not writing a model. We're leveraging the best models from the big companies that are pouring hundreds of millions of resources into these things.
Billions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, our contribution to the discussion, I think, is, what we think of broadly as making them compliance safe to use. So it's about the citation, it's about the prompt engineering that's appropriate for financial compliance. A big practice area for us is actually the data scoping in compliance. There are situations where you don't want to be considering the entire universe of the internet for an answer on something you want to say, for legal reasons, based on what we knew at the time and the information available to the financial institution. Here is, a decision that we made or what we reported on. That scoping is really important.
Mhm.
And again, I go back to the thing I mentioned previously about a lot of just understanding how the AI is responding to a prompt, and if in that tightly scoped data, it's actually has the requisite data to respond to you, and then stopping it if it doesn't. Those are some of the, in layman's terms, those are some of the areas in which our R&D focuses. So
Makes sense. I think you mentioned, you're not building any models. I think this is something I've been wondering is it seems like the cost of fine tuning LLMs in general has decreased a lot. I think DeepSeek in China has showed that the cost of building these models is not billions, but more like a couple hundred, a couple tens of millions. Now, I'm not saying that you guys are going to build your own model, but is it something that you thought about around fine tuning your existing models and with your own internal data? Obviously, you have such great workflow information. You know how a lot of cases play out and from end to end, and that information is not being fed into an LLM right now. So is that something you guys are thinking about? Is that something that you think is a bit more further down the line?
I think given the information security and consumer privacy regulations associated with the data that a financial institution would have about you, that's further out on the horizon. Yeah. So we also, we don't train models with the underlying customer data. We have to, go through a number of precautions to prevent that, and we do. And, I think we see, coincidentally this week, Stripe announced their new payments LLM that's trained on payments data. I can only imagine behind the scenes what Stripe had to do to like ensure that that wasn't actually going to leak private information about me as a Stripe consumer, or
Yeah.
you, Ian, about our payments and things like that. But we see some of that happening at large institutions like Stripe, but I think that's a ways off for compliance data, given the sensitivity of the information.
Yeah, that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
any interesting steps that you guys are working on at the lab that you can share with us, or is it more have you been rolling it out pretty gradually but pretty steadily as well?
We have been on a single roadmap and then introducing more utilitarian sub features of that roadmap over time. But at Hummingbird, we transparently believe that the future of a lot of compliance work as it exists today is automation through a combination of process automation and AI intelligence. We always believe there's going to be a need and room for human in the loop expertise. The status quo today is the majority of the human effort today in this practice area goes towards highly repetitive, low value reporting tasks, sort of obligatory check boxes and things like that. And I think you could ask any practitioner in the space and they would agree not enough time gets dedicated to complex investigation work, unraveling large scale crime operations, things like that, simply because there isn't reasonable capacity left over after you've satisfied your more mundane and repetitive compliance obligations, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we can blame the industry for that. It's just like not where the regulators are looking for you to spend your time. And I'm a total optimist. I think like AI, I think people naturally have a fear of like job loss or things like that. I think of it more as like the job is going to shift towards the things that humans are really good at: complex pattern analysis, understanding, and the nuance of different situation and handling those. And I think we'll have these great AI utilities and assistants to use in that research, and they'll be able to complete a lot of the really tedious sort of data entry oriented work that happens today as part of the industry. So
You mentioned human in the loop. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, you mentioned
no, yeah, please, yeah.
loop, which is really funny because that's pretty much my next question too. I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of talk from banks and financial institutions about not fully automating AI, not fully automating banking operations just yet, and having that human in the loop to oversee and manage. I'd love to hear your thoughts here. I mean, clearly you said that you think that humans are very important and integral to the process. How are compliance employees like reacting to a lot of this AI change? Is it making their life a lot easier, or do they feel replaced a little bit? I'd love to get your perspective here too.
I think folks approach AI with caution, given this profession is responsible for upholding things like consumer privacy and information security requirements and things like that. So folks are eager to have the utilitarian benefit, but they're appropriately sensitive to also protecting our rights as consumers around privacy and things like that. So that's good, right? That's number one. I think in terms of job change or job shift, if your job is literally manual data entry, copying from point A to point B, I don't know if that job is going to be necessary long term. Like AI is getting very good at doing that sort of work. Now, does that mean you lose your job and you're unemployed, or does it mean your job shifts towards more expertise-driven investigation work or reporting or collaboration with law enforcement or whatever that is? I'm cautiously optimistic that it will shift towards more complex investigation work. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there's a triage, like not every AML case is built the same, right? There's a triage factor in the hierarchy where there's the base level of like a normal case, and then the high complex ones that take a lot more work. So you think that AI can automate a lot of the base work, but there's still levels above that require human oversight.
There's definitely those more complex levels. I can say that definitively. Now, will they get resourced for investigation by the industry? I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And it's one of these things where, does anyone really know
Yeah.
what the next year of AI is going to look like
Next
in any
looks like month
practice
and a
area?
half.
It's
Yeah. Uh,
hard to say.
you-
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, something that's been a lot on a lot of people's minds is around AI agents in banking as well. So you talk about the SAR filing and how it's great at summarizing and researching. In theory, you can have an AI agent focused on just that, and maybe another AI agent focused on collecting information through other data sources. Is this something you guys have given any thought to? Is this something that you think? I think there's a lot of hype around AI agents, and I wonder on the compliance side whether that hype is realistic or a little bit pie in the sky right now.
I think it's realistic, but maybe to reframe it away from I think the agentic buzzword has come out. It describes a lot of things. It's a useful word, but it also means a lot of different things to different people.
Mhm.
And you highlighted some of the nuance, Ian, that I would kind of reframe with, which is like there's just different jobs to be done within the industry, and each of those can be kind of a branching pathway, right? You might start down the path of investigating an alert. You might learn through your initial investigation that an account takeover might be at play. And so that kind of opens a new pathway and playbook for how you continue the investigation. I think if we think about progressive agent enhancement of, it starts in one thing and then based on predicate conditions might follow up with several other things or several other, prompt engineered responses. That's actually how we're building, and that's how we're putting configurability in the hands of our customers to build those different kind of pathways. It's not the idea that one agent or one AI will do everything in your entire program. It's more like you might configure it and tune it to do your commercial client onboarding questionnaires and spot those answers, and then move over to anti-money laundering and do a level 1 investigation, which is just sort of a triage process usually. So we kind of see it as like different jobs to be done being built into these smaller packages that are easier to manage.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Before I let you go, and to the bankers and institutional folks that are listening, what advice do you have on implementing AI in financial services and actually getting something from an idea to, in real production?
Well, one thing, and I think it's more of just a human emotional thing, is like if you feel like you've been left behind or you're already out of date, just know that even from people who are following the AI market day to day, it's evolving so rapidly that really nobody knows the exact capabilities or things that will come out. There's no better time than right now to dive in and start researching things, and you won't be that far behind because it's evolving so rapidly. So that's number one, is just overcoming the fear of like, oh, I've missed out and it's passed me by. The other thing I would say is like, just addressing the concern we hear a lot in discussions with folks, which is an assumption that overnight there will move from things as they are today to full automation and replacing the humans. It's just simply not going to happen that
Yeah.
way. Yeah, I think, the reality is much more bite size and utilitarian applications that are helpful. They do, they summarize some documentation, or they surface information from past casework that you've done, or they maybe point out, parts of your procedural handbook that you weren't thinking about. And over time, I think that will evolve into like more and more of the work is being prepared for you and completed ahead of time. But it's certainly not going to be like, May 15th, we wake up a day after this recording and the
No
whole
more
thing's been
compliance
automated.
people exist. Everyone
Yeah.
end-to-end automated.
Yeah, we can all retire and just take time off and go to the beach. Yeah.
Yeah, I
No.
mean, you talked about human in the loop again, and I just want to bring it up because it feels like a great middle step towards that future. But I think the big question is that's a pretty long middle step. Like, it's not going to be like 6 months of human in the loop. It's probably like, a couple of years at a minimum, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, always for some things. And then, but the nature of what things is hard to predict. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Joe, as the industry changes a lot with AI, definitely would want to have you back on in the future. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.